On today's episode of Let's Talk F1, we discuss Robert Kubica and his ever-increasing chances of getting a Williams drive for next season. In the F2 report, Dan Tickton will join the lineup for Abu Dhabi as he, the Macau winner, looks to impress in Formula 2. I'll have a quick chat about what I'm going to be doing over the winter. Obviously, Formula 1's gone, so what am I going to be covering on this channel? All that and more, next. Welcome back everyone to Let's Talk F1, your weekly mini sort of chat show regarding Formula 1. It's just me talking to you guys about topics in the world of Formula 1. Usually this is our sort of weekly chance to discuss all the news and going on in Formula 1. And today, something that I've been wanting to cover for a little while, and by pure chance, I started recording this episode and then all of a sudden the news stories seem to sort of jump on this story as well. So I've hung fire a little bit, so this video will be coming out a little bit later on. I planned it to come out at about 3 o'clock. I'd started and set it up, all my equipment this morning, and then Autosport, then Motorsport Magazine, then all these different sites, even Mark Webber's official Instagram and Twitter, announcing that Robert Kubica will sign for Williams and will race in 2019 for the full season with Williams F1. Now, I want to make it fundamentally clear that this has not been announced, and many of these news sites are jumping on this straight away, far too early. It's almost as if, I think Autosport were the first to produce any sort of material on this, confirming, but Williams himself, Robert Kubica himself, and everyone involved within the team, there's been no announcements whatsoever. Claire Williams herself did announce on the Beyond the Grid podcast over on the official Formula 1 channel that there would be an announcement before Abu Dhabi. So we are expecting an announcement in the next couple of days. And with Autosport producing their main article with the title, Robert Kubica has agreed to a deal to race for Williams in the full 2019 season. Autosport understands. Now, it's that Autosport understands bit which makes you think, well, okay, well, this is more rumour going on. But I think Autosport, I think many people would agree, is one of the, I suppose, most reliable sources of motorsport information. I think that's definitely fair to say, but I still want to make it fundamentally clear before we have a big long chat about this one, because it will be a long chat about Robert Kubica today. I want to make it fundamentally clear that as of recording this episode, there has been no announcement as of yet. But obviously, it takes me about an hour to talk to you guys about this, and then it takes a couple more hours to edit and upload and all that goodness. So maybe by the time this has gone up, Robert Kubica has indeed signed, and I'm going to have to quickly produce another video talking about his deal he's got, what implications it will have. But hopefully in this video today, we'll be able to cover that and talk about all possibilities for Williams, all possibilities for Kubica, and everything involved with that. So, how are you guys? How are you? Hopefully you're all great. Just thought I'd quickly let you know, just throw this in there before we start. If you are new around here, weekly, daily episodes of Formula 1 and Formula E content and news. So if you're interested in Formula 1 or Formula E, feel free to subscribe. And if you fancy learning more, listening more, then that notification bell is always there if you fancy it. That's the formalities out the way. Let's get into the good stuff. Let's get into the meat of the video. Robert Kubica. Right, so let's start off then with, I suppose, I could start off with Robert Kubica's journey, but there's something I want to start off with first, which I suppose links in with his journey, and that's my personal opinion towards Robert Kubica. Now, I started watching Formula 1 in 2006, didn't really support anyone in 2006, if I'm being totally honest. Then 2007, I'd say that's the first real year I can remember fully supporting anyone. Bear in mind, I was younger than 10 years old. But the man I chose to support was Robert Kubica. Funnily enough, I don't know why. I don't have any clue why, but Robert Kubica was the man I supported. Then, during that 2007 season racing for BMW, had that big crash early on, sat out the rest of the season, and Sebastian Vettel took his place in that BMW. He then came back to a full race time seat in 2008 for BMW, getting his first ever win, the first Pole to ever get a win in Formula 1 in Canada, 1 year after that incredible crash. And being a young Kubica fan, it was great to see, but I can't lie, those memories are a bit hazy for me, so I just throwing that out there. But going back and watching it now, the speed he had in a car that wasn't the best on the grid. I know in 2008 it was a very solid car, but it wasn't the best car on the grid. But he was always able to outperform his teammate Nick Heidfeld, an experienced Formula 1 driver, quick in the lower categories, beating the likes of Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel, who both rate Kubica so highly. 2009, Robert Kubica stayed with BMW, but the car was absolutely nowhere on terms of pace, especially if you look at the season before. Now, Kubica, he did an episode of Beyond the Grid. I know I was talking about Claire Williams' episode, and links to these episodes will be in the description if you fancy listening to them. Both fantastic podcasts. Love them both. Love that series. But Kubica had said that because BMW's sole goal in Formula 1 was to get a race win. That was their only goal. They didn't really care about the Constructors' Championship. They knew established teams like Ferrari, McLaren, they were going to be the ones that were fighting for that one, Renault as well. And so BMW almost set out their marketing goal as to get one race win, then almost stop development and get out of there as quickly as they could. And really, that's what they did, unfortunately. They did do that 2009 season very unsuccessfully. And then they left the sport in 2010. Kubica, however, moved to Renault, a move that, in theory, could have worked very well. A works team back in sort of 2010, 2009, that sort of era of Formula 1. I suppose works teams weren't as important as they are now. Nowadays, works teams have a big implication on the engines run by the car, and currently we're almost in an engine formula, so that's a big emphasis on the performance of the cars. But back in 2010, that wasn't really a huge issue. But in his first year in Renault, in I suppose I want to call it an uncompetitive car, Robert Kubica alongside Vitaly Petrov, Kubica was able to get a podium position in the car that should not have been on the podium in Monaco, of all places. This guy was proving his talent in Formula 1, and it was really starting to look like he was the real deal. And in a car quick enough and capable enough, he now had the experience and the talent to really put up a championship fight. It really looked like it. Going into 2011, he was going to drive for what would end up being my favourite team of all time in Formula 1, Lotus. Lotus and Renault were going through this sort of transition period from Renault over to Lotus. And obviously following Kubica, it was the team I'd ended up almost supporting. But over the winter of the 2010-2011 seasons, Kubica had a major incident in rally and was unable to take part in the following season and has not raced in Formula 1 since. And being a Kubica fan, that was a big shock, because yes, I was young when I started supporting him, but then once he wasn't on the grid in 2011, I was really stuck. You know, I'd obviously heard about his accident, and being 12 or 13 years old, it was difficult to deal with in a way, because obviously I'd never really experienced a motorsport death or an injury, really. There'd been the Massa incident before, but he'd come back fine. But this was the first time in my lifetime that a big notable driver wasn't coming back to the grid. And that this was a really serious incident that could have cost him his life. He was very lucky not to. And for me, it took me a while to really find a team or a driver I wanted to support. That's why I stuck with Lotus. And ultimately, I've ended up, through that Lotus journey, supporting Romain Grosjean. But last year, well, actually, no, it wasn't last. Yeah, it was last year. Sorry, it was last year. I was thinking last season, but we're just about holding on to this season. That's going to be last season and next week. But last year, Kubica returned, did a practice session for Renault F1, the team that he drove for back in 2010. He did a test for the team in the mid-season Hungary test. It's almost like the modern equivalent of the young drivers test, but Renault gave a chance to Robert Kubica. Renault didn't know what was happening with their driver situation. They had Jolyon Palmer in the car. wasn't looking great, and let's be quite honest, Jolyon didn't quite live up to the early hype he had, especially his Formula 2 hype, GP2 back then. So it looked like Renault were going to look for a new driver. Unfortunately, that sort of broke down, especially after the Hungarian test. It didn't seem like Kubica quite had the pace, and it looked like the dream comeback was over. Then at the end of that season, Kubica was given a chance to drive for Williams in the end of season test. Up against Sergei Sorokin, it was those two fighting it out for the final seat at Williams as Felipe Massa was gone, and there was no real other candidates for that seat that had, I suppose, really serious backing behind them. There was Pascal Wehrlein, the Mercedes young driver, but we've seen how Williams, historically and in modern day terms, they don't really like to take, I suppose, young drivers from different teams. If they can help it, they like being an independent team. And they see George Russell now as their driver. They don't see him as a Mercedes young driver, although he is. But I think that's mainly because George Russell is a few drivers down the pecking order. You know, you've got Hamilton and Bottas, the Mercedes stars. Then you've got Ocon. He's the key Mercedes young driver. And then I'd say it's George Russell after those three. So in the Mercedes pecking order, he's not super high up there. So Williams like to see him as their own sort of special driver, and they would like to keep him at the team, and I believe he will stay at the team for quite some time. Last year, Sorokin won over Robert Kubica, but many stories would tell you that that wasn't due to his pace, that was due to his money and his backing behind him. And we know that Sergei Sorokin came with a lot of money, a lot of money, but he wasn't awful in the test. I was going to say out-qualified there, but he had better pace than Robert Kubica over that weekend of testing. And over the season this year, he's not been bad. And he is currently driver of the year in a lot of the Formula 1 polls all over the shop. Read into that what you will. Read into that what you will. So I'm sure some people out there are very impressed with Sergei Sorokin. I don't really believe that all these people have seriously voted for him as driver of the year, but then again, they might have. You know, I don't want to completely rule that out because he's not been terrible this year. He's not who I would vote for driver of the year, but that's just not my opinion. Yes, there is a lot of petitions, and polls online to vote for him as almost the meme lord of Formula 1. But he's not been bad, and he's done well against Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll, I suppose, has been sort of considered as the pay driver of Formula 1, but he himself came into Formula 1 with not terrible credentials, winning Formula 3, the series that Mick Schumacher has just won, and someone we're going to talk about a little bit later on, Dan Ticktum. He was a series contender this year, and those two drivers, Esteban Ocon won Formula 3, Max Verstappen didn't. These are the sort of pedigree of drivers that Lance Stroll is involved with. Lance Stroll's had a couple of difficult years in Formula 1 with Williams, but Sergei Sorokin this year was able to match him, and currently as it stands, and I think will stand at the end of the season, has out-qualified him in the qualifying head-to-head record. So although early doors it looked like, the Kubica dream was over, Sorokin's stolen it away, then near the end of this year, the news came out that Sorokin's backers had lost their money. Big court case against them that's still going on, and it looks like Sorokin's funding is out of the window. Williams have lost key figures like Rob Schmedley. He's left. I suppose Felipe Massa was a big driving force in their team last year. He's gone. Now key title sponsor and I suppose income source, Martini, they're leaving at the end of the year. Sorokin's backers, they're most likely gone. The big one, Lawrence Stroll and Lance Stroll, they're going to be gone for next year, although not officially confirmed that Lance Stroll has gone just yet, but it looks very likely he will be. And now there's a spare seat at Williams. Now, Kubica, this is his chance. Obviously, we're going to talk about it in detail. He was their third driver this year and has been. Done many a practice session, and I believe he will be taking part in the post-season Abu Dhabi test for Williams as well. He is the front runner. He really is the front runner for this seat, but he's not the only one. Now, first I will talk about Robert Kubica, why I think he is the front runner, and I think has a good chance to get in the seat. But I'll also talk about the few different other drivers involved in this seat that could still play a big part in this story. Now, I know I've spoken about the Williams seat for what seems like forever. Ever since the summer break, we've been talking about Williams. But silly season this year, or the driver market, to put it in layman's terms, or to put it in casual fan terms, the driver market this year has been crazy. And stories have been flying all over the place this year. And it really looks so uncertain who's going anywhere. You'd have to put your money on anyone, to be totally honest with you. So I just want that to be completely transparent in this video, that although whatever I will say here, even myself, I'm going to have to take it with a pinch of salt, because you just do not know this year. I've spoken about it many times on this channel. I've spoken about it many times on stream over on the F1 Word with Jonty and Sean and Alex and the likes. But I want to just have some time just to talk with you guys. I want to know your opinions as well. So whatever you hear, if you like what I say, if you don't, I want to know your comments below. And also, if I can and if I remember, I'll put up some polls in the top right hand corner of the screen. So if you want to do a little vote on who you think Williams should go with, then that'll be really fun to see as well. Who you guys think overall will grab that Williams seat. So we'll see that in a little bit. Robert Kubica then, let's start with him. Just gone through his journey. The big thing with Robert is his pace. Now, we could talk about funding. Funding is going to be a huge sort of factor in this, with Williams losing Lawrence Stroll, losing Martini. Kubica will come with sufficient backing. The marketing behind his story will be incredible, not just for Williams, but for the likes of Liberty Media and other affiliated companies with Williams. That story, that tremendous fairy tale comeback, will be a huge marketing ploy. And Kubica does come with Polish backers, and Nico Rosberg is part of his management team. All of this adds up. All of this will help towards going towards his seat, but I don't think that's the quencher. I really don't. And the main reason I think this, I think Williams will find a title sponsor. Whether it's a really out there and rogue title sponsor, we don't really know yet. We know the team that, or the company that were in line for it, Rich Energy, they've gone with Haas F1 for next year. So they've gone quiet now on the Williams scene. So it looks a bit, I suppose, it's going to be like a rogue sort of company that come out of absolutely nowhere. Last minute sort of deal. We hear over the winter, new livery, Williams are back on track. That's what I imagine will happen in terms of that. Kubica might himself bring a title sponsor. We know his Polish backers are very mysterious, if you will. We don't know exactly who they are. It's very similar to the guys that have just bought out Force India. We know it's Lawrence Stroll, but we know it's Lawrence Stroll and his consortium. We know a few different people in that consortium, but not all of them. We know one of the key guys in running the Monaco Grand Prix is involved in that consortium, but we didn't find that out until after they'd purchased the team. So this might be a similar sort of thing with Kubica, say. There could be, I don't know, let's just throw it out there, an energy drinks company. I know another energy drinks company in Formula 1, but it could be another one per se like that, funding Kubica's seat, that'll also put in a livery and be a title sponsor for the team as well. But just throwing it out there as well, teams do not need title sponsors. That is something that I think needs to be made fundamentally clear. Teams don't need title sponsors. It's just a good way of making money. McLaren have run without a title sponsor for quite some time now. Renault almost, I don't want to say Renault is their title sponsor, but it's in their title now. But what a title sponsor is, if you weren't aware, it's like Aston Martin Red Bull Racing. They're nothing to do with Aston Martin Red Bull. It's just a marketing thing that Aston Martin are called the title sponsor. But Kubica himself, like I said, I think it'll be the pace. He's had this injury. It seems like he's got some sort of limitations with his left arm, which in theory should hinder his driving. However, his pace on circuit, in practice, and in the post and mid-season practice sort of sessions, he hasn't looked too bad. And this year, up against Stroll and Sorokin, has looked very close with the two of them. And if all reports are to be believed regarding Robert Kubica and his pace, it seems to be it's getting a little bit quicker, a little bit closer to those guys as each time he gets into the car goes on. And with more simulation work behind closed doors, more time on track, he should be fine. And I'm starting to think now looking at the other candidates that we'll go through in a minute, this guy looks like the prime guy to take the seat, which will be absolutely incredible. He deserves it so much. I don't think he'll quite be the Kubica of old. I think that's fair to say. Seems to have lost some of his speed, and he is older. You know, we do have to remember that. I know drivers, I suppose, get into their prime around sort of their mid-30s, so arguably Kubica is in his prime, but he's got to relearn a whole different Formula 1. So it'll almost be as if a rookie is coming into Formula 1 at the age of, well, in their mid-30s. So it's going to be a completely new dynamic in Formula 1, and I think a lot of us Formula 1 YouTubers, news outlets and reporters, we can't really say how well he's going to do because it's such an unknown quantity. And even though there's all these guys saying that either he's going to jump in the car and be as quick as he once was, all these people saying he's going to be awful, he's going to be slow, waste of time, you really can't tell. It's complete guesswork with Robert Kubica, which I think makes it extra interesting, extra spicy, and makes me want to see it happen even more. The one thing that I think arguably I wouldn't like to see is him get absolutely destroyed by George Russell. That would be a shame to see, and we'd hate to see him in the back of the grid every weekend, but I don't think that would happen. But also at the same time, if it did happen and he had to step aside halfway through the year, that would taint his story a little bit, and I wouldn't like to see that. So I think this is looking really positive for Robert Kubica. It's going in the right direction, but there are other drivers out there that could still steal this seat, like Sergei Sorokin, the man we spoke about a little minute ago, the man who performed fairly well in last year's post-season test. Better than Kubica, we will have to throw that out there. He did perform better than Robert Kubica. Did come with a lot of financial backing, but as I mentioned as well, despite some solid performances this year, it looks like his backing has gone. Now, if you believe stories in the media, I know I'm saying this a lot this episode, but this really is almost a speculation piece. And once again, I'd love to know your thoughts as well, because that's the point of Let's Talk F1. Me talking to you guys and having that discussion in the comments below. But Sorokin, the main reason he got that seat was that backing. Despite the fact that he was, in all terms, quicker than Robert Kubica in that post-season test, the key number one reason he got that seat was the fact that he had a lot of money behind him, which is a shame. You know, it's not what we want to see in Formula 1 paid drivers, and Williams at the beginning of the year looked a little bit silly taking two paid drivers. But both of them this year, in a car that is absolutely nowhere in terms of pace, unstable through corners, low speed and high speed, both of them have pulled out some really fantastic performances, and both of them look like they deserve chances in Formula 1. Sergei Sorokin didn't have the best record in lower categories, was a sort of middle of the road, and that's a little bit unfair. One of these sort of top drivers, I suppose, top to middle drivers in GP2. A few wins here and there, a few podiums, but never really a big title challenge. Many people would say because of this, he didn't deserve a chance in Formula 1, especially considering the likes of Pascal Wehrlein were losing a seat last year. We saw Felipe Massa, he was leaving. It looked like juniors like Ollie Rowland, Alex Albon weren't going to get a chance. And it was starting to look as if Williams had made a big mistake by choosing this guy. I would just like to mention there, Alex Albon didn't do great in Formula 2 his first season. Done much better this year, but I was using him as an example. But after this year, Sorokin's really impressed, especially myself. Like I say, he's on all these polls getting Driver of the Year. I'm not too sure about that, but he has impressed a lot of people, and he's not the laughingstock that he came into Formula 1 almost being straight away. So that's been really nice to see. Getting into Q2, last time out in Brazil, improving every single race weekend. But, the big but, because at the moment you'd think, well, why would Williams get rid of him? He's got the pace, he's now got a bit of experience. They're taking a rookie on next year, and if they take on Robert Kubica, even though he has got experience, it's almost another rookie again. Why wouldn't they take Sorokin? Well, money talks in Formula 1, and Sorokin doesn't seem to have his back-ins. He doesn't seem, well, he doesn't, let's be honest, have an incredible sort of story behind him. Almost, if anything, it's a bit of a tainted story because he came into Formula 1 with financial backing and was plastered and stamped as a paid driver. Whereas Kubica comes with his fairy tale, marketing behind him is going to be brilliant, and I suppose if Sorokin gets a seat as well, that's going to be even more negative publicity because he blocked Kubica from getting the seat in the first place. So the only real thing, unfortunately, he's got going for him is this season of experience, which unfortunately for him, I don't think is going to be enough. And as much as I really do like Sergei Sorokin, he's really grown on me over the year, and I think he arguably does deserve another year in Formula 1. But looking at the grid, looking at all the young talent, all the stories up and down the grid, it's going to be so difficult for anyone like Sergei Sorokin to keep a seat next year. And so I think Sorokin won't be the man to get the seat. I think arguably, after Kubica and Sorokin, there's only one real other possibility for this seat, excluding Lance Stroll, because it's 99% confirmed he'll be going to Force India next year. The other big man, Esteban Ocon, the man who's driving for Force India this year. So, you know, if you do some quick mental maths, you'll think, oh, well maybe, oh, and a sec, Stroll's sealing Ocon's seat at Force India. And yeah, that's pretty much what's happening. Esteban Ocon, or Ocon, however you say it. I say Ocon. I sometimes say Ocon. I change it every time, really. But today we're calling him Esteban Ocon. He looks like he's going to be out of a seat next year. And we spoke about him a little bit earlier. Mercedes' young driver looks to be the man to replace Valtteri Bottas in 2020. But for 2019, he's without a drive and is in desperate need of... Well, actually, is he in desperate need of a drive? Drivers before in the past have left Formula 1, come back, looked a hell of a lot quicker, a hell of a lot better. Felipe Massa did it, Fernando Alonso did it, Kimi Raikkonen did it, Romain Grosjean did it, and they're just modern examples. So it's not as if it's unheard of that a driver would leave F1 for a year due to whatever circumstances and come back a hell of a lot better. That's not unheard of. But obviously everyone wants a Formula 1 drive. And gathering more and more experience, especially in a backmarket car. You can learn a lot in a backmarket car, especially how to navigate through traffic, how to extract the most of in a bad car over a bad weekend, is an experience I think Ocon had back in 2016 for half a year with Manor. But at the end of the day, what Ocon brings with him is arguably that Mercedes backing, that bit of experience, and the raw pace. Which you think to yourself, well, there are three major points there. So let's start off then with the experience. Kubica, like I say, in theory has more seasons under his belt than Ocon, but not in modern Formula 1 cars. Ocon got age on his side as well. Ocon, I think he's only 24, I believe, 23, 24. His speed is incredible. Almost arguably outperforming Sergio Perez this year. Perez got a fluke podium in Azerbaijan, and that's the only real reason he's been in front of him in the championship this year. A weekend where Ocon DNF'd on the first lap with a bit of contact. Ocon's been very, very quick this year, and like I say, is the man to partner Lewis Hamilton in the next few years if Bottas ends up not performing at Mercedes. And of course, the Mercedes partnership, in theory, could help Williams. Mercedes could pump a lot of money into Williams if they really wanted to. So you think to yourself, yeah, oh, there's some fantastic reasons. Take Ocon, take Ocon. But it's not going to happen. It's really not going to happen. And again, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but Williams already have one Mercedes young driver. And Williams, at the end of the day, want to be Williams. They want to be seen as the independent F1 team, which arguably they still are. They do have that Mercedes engine in the car and one Mercedes young driver. A lot of rumours saying that they're going to be converted into a Mercedes young driver team. So, in theory, that could still go through. With this title sponsor and main sponsor not within the team, this is the perfect chance for Mercedes to jump in. And last year, at around this sort of time, there was the announcement that Alfa Romeo were going to take over Sauber and make that a Ferrari young driver team. But Sauber is still Sauber. And this could happen with Williams next year with Mercedes. It very easily could happen. And there's a perfectly wide open door there for Mercedes to do it. But I don't think Williams will cave in. I don't. I think, well, Claire Williams, Frank Williams, everyone involved within the team likes being that independent team and will go down fighting. They won't be a Mercedes young driver team. They won't be a young driver team for anyone. They will keep their identity. And I think that's the unfortunate thing for Esteban Ocon. Because if he didn't have those Mercedes links, yeah, he'd be in that Williams seat straight away. But they've gone with George Russell. And they need title sponsors and backing. And although, yes, Mercedes probably could give them free engine, say, to have Ocon in that car, it won't be enough. And like I say, with George Russell still in there, I'm not too sure if Mercedes are going to be that willing to put in even more money just to get Esteban Ocon a seat when, in theory, 1 year out of F1 isn't really going to hurt him all that much. But on Esteban Ocon's side of things, yeah, he'd love a seat. And like I say, if he didn't have those Mercedes ties, I think Claire Williams would absolutely jump on that chance to have Esteban Ocon in that car. But after those three drivers, there's no one else really in the frame anymore. And that all seemed to have changed all of a sudden. There was talk that maybe Nick de Vries would be in the car, maybe Alex Albon, maybe Brendan Hartley if all went that pear-shaped. Artem Markelov in Formula 2, he seemed to have a chance at one point. Ollie Rowland is someone that performed very well when Charles Leclerc was in Formula 2 with him. On the bit of, I don't want to say the older side, because he's still a young guy, but I think he's 26 or 27. Their third driver and simulator driver could be in with a chance. Esteban Gutierrez, a driver I'm really not a fan of, he could have been in the running. And I suppose Pastor Maldonado, with the money he's always able to bring, he's not a far off shout, especially at one time this year. He really could have been a contender. But now as reports die down more and more, season's coming to the end, Kubica looks to be the front runner. And for me, yeah, I believe them. I really do believe them. Like I've almost gone through there, Kubica, the story behind, but more importantly, the financial backing. That is the one thing Williams need, and I think that's one of the key things Robert Kubica can do in the long term. Not just with initial investment from supporters and people who are trying to put Kubica in this seat, but I suppose supporters in this terms of fans as well across the year, and the media coverage Williams will get having Robert Kubica in that seat, the TV coverage they will get having Robert Kubica in that seat. Megabucks, and that will be the quencher of this deal. So yeah, I can see Kubica going, but I'd love to know your thoughts. As always, guys, if you want to vote, in the top right hand corner, all you have to do is press the little I button. I might do two quizzes. Who do you want to see in the seat, and who do you think will get the seat? That'll be really interesting to see. And if you want to do a little bit more long form or whatever, chuck it down in the comments below. I love talking to you guys. But let's move over to a little segment I've not done for a little while, the Formula 2 report. It's been quite some time since we did a Formula 2 report, but it is back with the news today that Daniel Ticktum, the Formula 3 Macau winner this year, the Formula 3 title hunter and Red Bull young driver, will be racing for Arden in this year's Abu Dhabi weekend of Formula 2. Arguably, this has come out of nowhere a little bit. Very similarly, Lando Norris did almost the exact same thing last year, won the Euro F3 Championship and then took part in Formula 2 in the final round. And Dan Ticktum's doing that this year, but you're probably wondering, why is he doing it this year? I know Norris did it last year, but why chuck him in for the final few rounds? So, here's what's happened. You Formula 3, Euro F3, which is changing to Formula 3 next year, that is completely done now. Mick Schumacher won that. He completely smashed it over the final few rounds, let's be totally honest there. Dan Ticktum, who was leading the championship for the majority of the championship, seemed to go off the boil a little bit at the end of the year. Got a little bit flustered. Arguably, the car wasn't performing at its best and ultimately didn't take home the championship. But this weekend, for the second year in a row, won the... I don't really know how you do it. It's Formula 3, GP3 mashup, World Cup, Formula 3 World Cup, Macau. We all know Macau. And I just want to take this moment as well to wish all the best to Sophia Flourish and everyone involved in that incident over the weekend. I don't want to talk about it too much here. She's gone through surgery and seems to be fine, but we wish them all the best over there. But Daniel Ticktum was the champion of that race and continues his journey towards Formula 1. And with Toro Rosso without a driver next year, and with Dan Ticktum getting ever closer with super license points, and with it looking that over the winter super license points may change a little bit, Dan Ticktum, don't rule him out of the Toro Rosso seat next year. Really don't. But at the moment, as it stands, he will not be able to get enough super license points to be in Formula 1 next year. So Formula 2 makes sense. And I 100% expect him to be there next year. But why now? Why is he going in there this weekend? Well, here's the lowdown. Like I say, Dan Ticktum, he's done good enough to get there. But why Arden? Arden this year, their two drivers are Maximilian Gunther, someone who has performed fairly well in Formula 2 this year. But here is the big one. He is going to be in Formula E next year. He's going to be in Formula E, which starts December the 15th, which I know is still a little while away, really, but he's got to prepare for that. He has to prepare for that right now. And so he won't be racing in Abu Dhabi. So what does this mean? Well, this means there's a spare seat. And who does that go to? Well, that was the big tie-up. Because in Formula 2, there's all sorts of, let's call them, floater drivers. Really, that, so I suppose, swap from team to team, never really do anything. You've got the likes of Roberto Merri, ex-Formula 1 driver, didn't do a full year of Formula 1, so stayed in Formula 2. He's the sort of guy that goes from team to team to help them out a little bit for one-off races or a few races. But no, they've gone with Dan Ticktum. They could have gone with the likes of Mick Schumacher, but I imagine with Mick Schumacher's Ferrari young driver ties, wasn't ever really going to happen with Arden. Red Bull want to try and get Dan Ticktum into Formula 1 as quickly as possible. So the more experience he can have in F2 now, the better. And I think that's why they've chucked him in. Why not? Formula 3's done. He's not doing anything for the rest of the year. So let's chuck him in and let's see what happens. Arden, we're on the front row in Russia. You're seeing a few different pictures here and there. Max Gunther has picked up the odd podium this year. Hasn't been awful. So he's in a car, definitely, that has the pace, I suppose, I don't want to say to win races, but at the end of the day, Formula 2, anything can happen. So yeah, when it boils down to it, he does have the pace to win races. So for Dan Ticktum, a guy that's rated very highly, a guy that I think next year could fight for the Formula 2 title, this is going to be a really interesting one to see. And look at what Lando Norris was able to do over that first weekend. Picked up a couple of points last year in Abu Dhabi. I wouldn't imagine Dan Ticktum being that far off. I really wouldn't. And if he is going to keep trying to push for a Toro Rosso seat for next year, again, unlikely, but definitely for 2020, this is the best way to start. And in that pink livery car, which, again, looks like it's going to be the pink livery car. I doubt Red Bull will have enough time to slap a Red Bull livery on there, but you never know. You never know. With the race taking part this weekend, I doubt it. So I think it will be the pink BWT livery once again on the car. But Dan Ticktum, the big news, he will be driving in Formula 2 this weekend as the title wraps up with George Russell, the favourite, but Alex Albon, who again, he could be raced in Formula 1 next year for Toro Rosso or Formula E for Nissan. That is the big title fight. And I'd love to know who you think is going to win the title fight. George Russell looks certain, if I'm being totally honest with you, he's going to have a diabolical weekend. But the man with the most pole positions, the most race wins, and obviously the most points overall, looks like he's going to take his first Formula 2 and only Formula 2 World Championship. If you weren't aware, Formula 2, you can only win the championship once, and then you're not allowed back in. So he looks like he's going to win it in his rookie year, just as Charles Leclerc did on his way to Williams next year. But that's something I'd really like to know in the comments below, guys. Your thoughts on George Russell versus Alex Albon. Albon's on a real sort of push of form as well, so don't count him out. But it looks very unlikely that George Russell's going to lose it at this point. And of course, I'd love to know your thoughts on Dan Ticktum, a controversial figure. Some of the things he's done and said over the years haven't been great. So I'd love to know your thoughts, him in Formula 2. So before we go then, just a quickie from me, just to let you know that tonight I will be on stream once again with the F1 word. Not too sure what we're talking about, but I imagine it'll be a little bit of a build-up towards the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. So that's at 7 o'clock. So if you fancy coming over and checking that out and listening to me again, well, actually, yeah, that's probably something you won't want to do, is listen to even more of me. But I'm usually over there at the moment doing bits and bobs here and there with Sean and John T and the crew. So if you fancy checking that out, links as always will be in the description. Finally get my words out, but wanted to quickly go over what I'm doing in the winter. Something that I suppose a lot of content creators need to really sort of sort out early, because winter Formula 1 can be a very barren place. I know this because the first ever sort of part of my YouTube journey on this channel was in the winter. So it was very difficult to get started, but I'm going through my first proper winter now, and I imagine it's going to be a little bit different than normal. So I thought I'd just share with you guys what I have in sort of in my head, what plans I have in place over the winter. So obviously the big one's Formula E. That's starting on the 15th of December, and at the moment, I'm trying to put out a fair few Formula E videos to get you guys sort of, I don't want to say educated, but to include you a little bit more with the Formula E sort of environment, to teach you guys. I'm not going to lie, I do like to teach people about Formula E and to get people into Formula E if I can, but Formula 1 stuff is going nowhere. Let's Talk F1 will remain, that will stay in place, and I'll be starting a little sort of new series, a weekly series, and it's going to be a Formula 1 opinion piece. So a little bit like we did last week with Max Verstappen, regarding when will he win his first World Championship, a little bit like we've done today with Robert Kubica. But I want to try, if I can, to make Let's Talk F1 more news-based, which I know at the moment is very difficult to do, but we're trying, and I love having discussions and talks with you guys. So I'm going to try and make Let's Talk F1 over the winter more news-based, more factual if I can, and then have a separate series, weekly series, a shorter form, maybe 10 to 20 minutes of a video, very similarly to what I did when I first started my channel. Did a few of those, really enjoyed those. They did quite well, and I think you guys enjoyed them as well. So I'd love to bring those back, talking about Fernando Alonso. Will he come back? Nico Hülkenberg, will he ever get a podium? Romain Grosjean, is he a bit too crazy for Formula 1? All that sort of thing that I think over the winter will keep the Formula 1 train going for you guys and for myself, because it can be a very barren and cold place, the winter, for Formula 1. So we've got to wait really till February for that. But there's still one more weekend, so keep your eye out for previews, race reviews, and oh yeah, that's a big thing. This weekend I will be commentating, or I suppose commentating is a strong word, but doing the race watch along with Sean on the F1 word. Qualifying and the race I should be doing. So if you are watching, don't like Sky commentary, I just want to hear a few other guys their thoughts while the race is going on, please check that out during the race on Sunday. That should be a lot of fun, and my first time, probably will make a few mistakes here and there, so if you're interested, please go and check that out on Sunday. But that is the end of this week's Let's Talk F1. If you are new around here, please feel free to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Formula E and Formula 1 goodness over here galore. That's the formalities as always, but I just want to say again, thank you for watching. You've been listening to me for 45 minutes almost. That is a crazy amount of time. You guys, in the politest way, are nutters sometimes, but I love each and every one of you. Thanks for watching. Comment your thoughts as well Love those discussions, and I'll see you guys in the next one.